There is a version of you that only exists in your head. That version wakes up early. That version finishes the project. That version has already started the business, written the book, built the body, changed the life. You can see that version so clearly it almost feels like a memory instead of a hope. Then there is the version of you that actually lives your days. And lately, the gap between those two versions has been getting wider. You are not lazy. You are not unmotivated in the way people usually mean it. You have plans. You have notes on your phone full of ideas. You have watched the videos, read the threads, made the list. The problem is not that you don't know what to do. The problem is that knowing has quietly replaced doing, and you haven't noticed the switch. Here is a day that probably feels familiar. You wake up, and for about 10 minutes, you are the person you want to be. You picture the version of today where you actually do the thing. Then you check one notification, and that 10 minutes disappears into an hour, and the hour disappears into the afternoon. You tell yourself you'll start after you eat. You tell yourself you'll start once you feel a bit more awake. Night arrives, and instead of the work, you have a familiar, heavy feeling, the feeling of watching another day close without anything in it. That feeling is not weakness. It's a signal, and it's worth understanding instead of just enduring. Your brain runs two systems that are almost always arguing with each other. One system is future-focused. It wants the outcome, the version of you that made it. The other system is present-focused. It only cares about how the next 10 minutes feel, and it treats anything uncertain or effortful as a threat to be avoided. When you sit down to do real work, that second system doesn't see progress toward my goal. It sees risk. It sees the chance that you'll try and it won't be good enough. So it looks for an exit. And your phone is always the nearest one. Every time you take that exit, something quiet but important happens. Your brain gets a small hit of relief, and it logs a lesson. Avoiding this task made the discomfort go away faster than doing it would have. That lesson gets stronger every time you repeat it. You're not fighting a lack of willpower. You're fighting a habit your own brain built to protect you from a threat that was never actually dangerous. Here's the part that makes this harder to see. A lot of what feels like preparation is actually avoidance wearing a disguise. Watching another video on productivity. Reading one more article about how successful people think. Reorganizing your plan for the 5th time. None of that is nothing. It feels like movement. But movement and progress are not the same thing. If you already know the next physical action you need to take, and you still haven't taken it, more input isn't the missing piece. Consumption has become the comfortable substitute for the harder, riskier work of creating something and putting it out into the world. There's also a specific kind of stalling that looks like high standards, but is actually fear. You wait for the right conditions. You wait to feel ready. You tell yourself you're just being careful, that you want to do it properly instead of rushing. But properly, quietly, becomes later. And later becomes never. Because there is no version of ready that arrives on its own. What's actually happening is this. As long as you haven't tried, you get to keep believing you would have been great at it. The moment you actually attempt it, and it comes out clumsy or average, that belief is at risk. Staying in planning mode protects the fantasy. It just costs you the real thing. It helps to be honest about what's really being avoided here. It isn't the task. It's the possibility of finding out that the version of you in your head might not match the version of you in reality. That's a real fear. And it deserves to be named instead of just felt. But consider the trade you're making by refusing to test that fear. You don't get to keep the good version of yourself. You just get to keep not knowing, which slowly starts to feel the same as knowing the worst, somewhere along the way. Most of us absorbed the idea that failing is the opposite of succeeding. It isn't. Not trying is the opposite of succeeding. A failed attempt still gives you information. What didn't work, what to adjust, what you're actually capable of once you push past the first bad draft. Doing nothing gives you nothing except the same anxious loop tomorrow. Every person you've ever admired for what they built has a long, unglamorous list of attempts that didn't work. What separates them isn't that they failed less. It's that a failure didn't end the process for them. It just became the next data point. So, how do you actually move from picturing your life to building it? Not with a burst of motivation, because motivation is a mood, and moods are unreliable narrators. You move with structure, small enough that it doesn't trigger the alarm system, and repeatable enough that it becomes evidence. Start by shrinking the task until resistance drops. Not write the book. Open the document and write for 10 minutes. Not get fit, put your shoes on, and walk to the end of the street. The goal of the small version isn't the output. It's proving to the present focused part of your brain that doing the thing didn't actually hurt. Do that enough times and the alarm gets quieter. Not because you became a different person, but because you retrained the part of you that was sounding it. Pay attention to your environment, because it's doing more work than you're giving it credit for, in the wrong direction. If your phone is within reach, you will reach for it. That's not a character flaw. It's just what happens when the easiest option is also the nearest one. People who seem to have effortless discipline usually don't have more of it than you. They've just engineered a room where the productive choice requires less effort than the distracting one. Put the phone in another room during your work block. Close every tab you don't need open. Make the useful action the path of least resistance, instead of the one that requires you to fight yourself. Expect the first attempts to be bad, and let that be fine. Nobody's first paragraph, first sketch, first pitch was the version that ended up mattering. The purpose of a first attempt is to exist, so that a second attempt has something to improve. Chasing quality before you've built the habit of showing up is how most efforts die in the planning stage. And when you miss a day, because you will, resist the instinct to treat it as proof that you're back to square one. One skipped day is a data point. It only becomes a pattern if you decide it means something about who you are and let that story talk you out of the next attempt. The people who keep going aren't the ones who never fall off. They're the ones who don't turn a single bad day into a permanent verdict. This is also why beating yourself up doesn't work as a strategy, even though it can feel like accountability. Guilt keeps you tangled up in yesterday instead of freeing you for today. If a friend told you they missed one day of a new habit, you wouldn't tell them they're a failure. You'd tell them to start again tomorrow. Offer yourself that same sentence, not because you're letting yourself off easy, but because shame has never actually been the thing that got anyone to sit down and do the work. None of this requires you to become a different person. It requires you to stop treating the version of you in your head as a finished character and start treating them as someone you build. One small, unremarkable action at a time. Not today, in some dramatic, all-at-once way, just the next 10 minutes, then tomorrow's next 10 minutes. That's the whole method. It was never going to look impressive from the outside. adds up into something that eventually does. You already know what the first small action is. Stop reading and go do it.